Hey guys, tonight we drift back to a moment where roses hung heavier than laws, powdered wigs were wider than doorframes, and the simple act of smelling like flowers could ignite whispers, warnings, and oh yes, a potential riot. You're standing just outside the royal gardens at Versailles, sun-drenched petals curling on the breeze. The gravel crunches softly under embroidered slippers. A maid fans herself. Somewhere in the hedges, someone is very clearly fainting, but fashionably. And as you take a deep breath, you're hit with it. That scent. Sweet, sharp, too perfect. Rose, jasmine, a whisper of orange blossom, and something else. Something deeper. Like crushed grass under silk. Like someone rich pretending to be humble. Welcome to the world of Marie Antoinette's perfume. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love knowing where and when you're listening. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It's late summer, 1782. You're trailing through Versailles, the world's most expensive maze of indulgence. And in the middle of it, Marie Antoinette, Queen of France, trendsetter, lightning rod, walking contradiction. Her perfume, a floral blend called Homme de la Rose, is more than just a signature scent. It's a political statement disguised in a pretty bottle. It smells like roses, but also like rebellion. You move closer, brushing past thick hedges, where noble ladies gossip while pretending not to. Someone mutters that the Queen's scent is too bucolic. Another whispers that it's meant to mock the very people who scrub chamber pots. The irony? Marie had that perfume designed to smell like her fantasy farm life. The Homme, her make-believe village complete with dairymaids and straw hats that cost more than most dowries. Historians still argue whether this perfume was crafted with irony or obliviousness. Did Marie truly think it would make her seem relatable? Or was she just playing peasant for the aesthetic and hoping no one sniffed too closely? But this is Versailles, and nobody does subtle here. You pass a cluster of courtiers fanning themselves aggressively, pretending they aren't judging. One of them, the Duchess de Montbarry, leans in conspiratorially and mutters, "I hear the Queen's perfume is made with rose oil extracted by virgins at dawn." You raise an eyebrow. That sounds unnecessarily complicated. Also false. Probably. Still, the scent becomes a subject of fascination. It lingers behind her as she enters a room. People whisper, swoon, or scowl. One soldier from the Royal Guard reportedly said, "I smelled Her Majesty before I saw her, and I knew it would be a long day." The perfume was designed by Jean-Louis Fargin, the Queen's personal perfumer, whose nose was considered second only to God's. He took his job very seriously. Rumor has it he once fainted when someone spilled vinegar near his workshop. Fargin worked tirelessly to create a fragrance that captured Marie's idea of natural nobility. Not too strong, but unmistakably royal. The final recipe included May rose, iris root, orange blossom, sandalwood, and a few secret ingredients that, to this day, perfumers try, and fail, to replicate. But the problem wasn't the ingredients. It was the timing. Outside the gilded walls, France is struggling. Bread prices are rising. The streets of Paris don't It didn't help that Marie's perfume wasn't exactly subtle. You could smell it from across the room. Some said it entered 5 seconds before she did. Others claimed the scent clung to upholstery, people, and even pets. One report from a visiting noblewoman claimed her lapdog sneezed violently for 3 days after being kissed by the Queen. That might be an exaggeration. But it gets worse. At one evening fete, someone accidentally knocked over a bottle of the Queen's fragrance during a dance. The scent filled the ballroom, overpowering everything. Guests coughed politely. Several nobles fainted from intensity, which in court speak meant they dramatically exited for air and attention. The king, amused, reportedly quipped, "If only we could bottle Marie's perfume as cannon smoke, the war would be over by dinner." Charming! The perfume's popularity spreads. Replicas are sold in secret. Nobles try to bribe Fargin for a sample. One prince offers him a horse, Another threatens to burn his workshop down. Farjan wisely declines both. Meanwhile, the queen's scent is beginning to ruffle more than powdered feathers. The whispers grow louder. She smells like stolen tax money. She perfumes while we starve. Do you think rose petals can buy bread? This is how it starts, not with a speech or a scandal, but with a smell. A sweet, layered, carefully curated scent that turns the air itself into an argument. One market woman is overheard telling her neighbor, "The queen smells like the lies of Versailles." The phrase catches on. Someone scrawls it on a bakery wall. Later that week, pamphlets appear mocking the queen's perfumed poverty cosplay. They're crude, a little cartoonish, and wildly popular. You can feel it, something thick and invisible moving through the crowd. A different kind of cloud. Not jasmine. Not rose. Not even sweat. It's unrest. Perfume, of all things, has become the symbol of the divide. Between Versailles and Paris. Between powdered wigs and bare feet. Between fantasy and famine. And while Marie Antoinette might still believe her scent makes her seem closer to the people are catching wind of something very different. Something that stings the nose. And before long, someone will throw a bottle. You wake to the sound of water simmering, not tea, not soup, but scented water being poured from glass vials into crystal basins. You're standing inside the perfumery of Jean-Louis Farjan, nestled deep within a winding Parisian side street. The year is 1780, and the air is heavy with oils and ambition. Tiny corks pop like gentle fireworks. A single daisy wilts on the workbench, probably dropped by some star-struck errand girl who snuck a whiff too close and lost all sense of spatial coordination. Farjan, the man behind Marie Antoinette's fragrance, is pacing. He's not what you expected. Tall, wiry, wearing a waistcoat with 3 mismatched buttons and spectacles perched halfway down his nose. There's powdered sugar on his sleeve, likely from the pastry he forgot to eat this morning. But his hands, steady as gravity, hold a glass stirrer over a vial like it's an instrument of war. Because in some ways it is. Farjan isn't just a perfumer. He's a nose. One of a handful of elite scent creators who can identify a flower by smell alone, distill emotion into aroma, and blend the impossible. In France, his kind are part wizard, part apothecary, part psychologist. And when the Queen of France hires you, you don't just mix scents, you shape narratives. Today's task, perfecting what he calls the pastoral mirage. A fragrance that would let Marie Antoinette play peasant, at least olfactorily, without risking actual dirt. He dabs a little onto a silk square and waves it toward you. The scent hits like memory, warm hay, crushed herbs, rosewater steeped in cream, and something fleeting. Like innocence that's been around long enough to know it won't last. It's beautiful. And it's dangerous. Farjan frowns. He sniffs again. Too much narrowly, he murmurs, then promptly throws the entire batch out a window. You don't hear it shatter. It probably lands in a flower bed with 3 other failed attempts. The cost? About a month's rent. But Farjan doesn't care. To him, mediocrity is more scandalous than debt. He jots down a note, reduce citrus. Add white musk. Increase rose absolute. He pauses, taps the pen to his chin, then scribbles one more line. Must feel like candlelight against bare ankles. Historians still argue whether he was a genius or just chronically sleep-deprived. But what no one disputes is that Farjan knew Marie Antoinette inside and out, or rather, he knew how she wanted to be seen. She didn't want to smell like a queen. She wanted to smell like a dream of someone not being queen. Her request for the perfume came with detailed, handwritten instructions. It must not be cloying. It must not be obvious. It must evoke the quiet of my garden before breakfast and the memory of a kiss I haven't yet given. No pressure, right? Farjan gets to work. He begins with rose, always rose. Not just any rose, but the Rosa centifolia, grown in Grasse, plucked before sunrise, petals pressed while the dew still clings. He adds tuberose for heat, a whisper of violet for grace, and a dangerous amount of galbanum, an earthy resin that smells, frankly, like crushed green dreams and broken rules. Then, because Marie is Marie, he includes a drop of vanilla. Imported. Expensive. Scandalously indulgent. And finally, just a hint of cedarwood to ground it all, to remind her, perhaps, that she is still a queen, no matter how many chickens she pretends to feed at her play farm. The final scent is unlike anything Versailles has ever known. It's fresh. It's feminine. It's oddly intimate. Like catching someone laughing to themselves. Like letters left unsent. Like wearing a borrowed coat and finding a secret in the pocket. He names it Hameau de la Rose, Rose Hamlet. The queen is delighted. So delighted, in fact, that she commissions 10 bottles, each hand-blown, etched with daisies and sealed with wax bearing her personal crest. Only a few will be worn. The rest? Displayed like perfume propaganda, subtle perfume propaganda, of course. Word spreads quickly. Fargen becomes the darling of the court. His workshop swells with requests, duchesses begging for floral diversions, courtiers demanding to smell like wood nymphs, generals awkwardly requesting something more masculine but still soft, like an expensive glove. He complies, mostly. And yet, beneath the success, Fargen worries. He hears the rumblings from the city. The grumbling about powdered wealth and scented hypocrisy. His apprentice, a sharp-eyed teenager named Thibault, points out one day, people don't want to smell you before they can afford bread. Fargen sighs, nods, and promptly mixes a batch of cologne he calls Civic Wind. It smells like lemon, honesty, and very mild soap. It sells poorly. Because the elite don't want honesty, they want escape. And Fargen? He's in the business of escape. Bottled, corked, and carefully tied with a ribbon. By 1782, he's crafting more than perfumes, he's crafting legends. Fragrances with names like Whisper of the Orchard, Dream in Milk, and Shadow of Strawberries. One noblewoman insists he looks down at his ink-stained hands. They smell like rose and fear. Marie writes him a letter the next day. My perfume is perfect, she says. But does it still suit the times? They say the air outside Versailles smells different now. Can you craft something that might bridge the difference? Fargen doesn't answer. He just stares at his shelf, lined with bottles of scent too delicate for revolution, and wonders how long until one of them is hurled through a palace window. The scent slips through Versailles like a polite ghost, always noticed, never blamed. As you wander past sunlit corridors and silk-draped parlors, it clings in the air, the queen's perfume, subtle and expensive, like powdered velvet laced with secrets. It curls beneath skirts, brushes against coat collars, and settles into tapestries where even moths would rather smell it than nibble. But in this gilded palace, nothing is ever just fragrance. Because at Versailles, perfume is politics. It's mid-1780s now, and France's royal court is not merely a social club, it's an olfactory battleground. To smell like the queen is to align with her. To wear a different floral blend is to make a statement. You've barely stepped into the salon before you catch a whiff of something sharp and competitive, bergamot, perhaps, or crushed lavender worn aggressively by Madame de Polignac, Marie Antoinette's closest friend, and possibly, if the pamphlets are to be believed, her something more than friend. And just behind her, wafting through the door, is the Marquis de Villeroi, who favors a musk that smells like cinnamon-dusted ambition. You learn quickly that no one wears fragrance by accident here. That powdered orange blossom says I'm loyal, while green fig might whisper I prefer the Austrian cousin. That if someone smells of honeysuckle, they're probably trying to steal someone's job, or someone's husband. Perfume is language in Versailles. It's code. It's espionage with atomizers. Even the servants catch on. One maid is known to pause and sniff before entering a room, just to check the political climate. A butler once famously claimed he could predict royal arguments based on the queen's scent strength each morning. Historians still argue whether this perfumed communication was conscious strategy, or just rich people being dramatic. Likely both. After all, this is the same court that once debated whether a certain bow on a shoe violated protocol. And if a shoe could cause diplomatic confusion, imagine what a fragrance might do. Back in her private quarters, Marie Antoinette lounges with a handkerchief pressed gently to her cheek, embroidered not with her initials, but a cluster of daisies. You catch the scent again. Hameau de la Rose, freshly reapplied after an afternoon in the gardens. She's not wearing it just to feel pretty. She's wearing it because tonight's dinner includes a delegation from Austria, and she needs to smell subtly of home without appearing disloyal to France. So, Fargen adds the lightest drop of Edelweiss to her pulse points. Let it whisper, he tells her. Not shout. And whisper it does. Later that evening, a diplomat leans in and says with a smile, Your Majesty carries the Alps in her sleeves tonight. To which Marie replies, only the nice bits. Not the blizzards. Cue gentle laughter. That's how tight the game is. Every scent, a syllable. Every note, a nudge. The Queen uses fragrance not just to charm, but to disarm. It works, most of the time. But scent is fickle. And Versailles is full of rivals. Take Madame du Barry, former mistress of Louis XV, who once entered a salon wearing a perfume so sharp it allegedly cleared the entire wing of sneezing courtiers. Her statement? I'm still here, and you're still breathing me in. Or the Comtesse de Noailles, who famously refused to wear any scent that didn't include frankincense, claiming it made her closer to God. It made her closer to being left out of parties, but still, these were not women who played fair. And Marie? She was raised in Austria, where fragrance was softer, more private. At first, she seemed outmatched in the perfumed politics of Versailles. But she adapted quickly, weaponizing softness in a way that left her critics confused and flustered. When another noblewoman accused her of frivolity for smelling like sugared meadows, Marie responded with a sweet smile and arranged for that woman's portrait to hang beside a pig in the hunting gallery. Passive-aggressive? Definitely. But floral vengeance is still vengeance. Meanwhile, courtiers began copying her perfume, hoping to rise in favor, or at least smell like someone who had influence. Knockoff versions of Hameau de la Rose began circulating in powdered form, applied to wigs, fans, and even letters. You pass a lady now fluttering her fan like it's a political pamphlet, hoping its carefully copied scent will draw the Queen's attention. Spoiler, it won't. Marie has a nose trained by Fargen. She can tell when someone's using an imitation. And she does not take kindly to forgeries. One evening, during a masked ball, she passes a woman wearing a version of her perfume, but not her perfume. The Queen pauses, leans in, and says it's a lovely effort. So very ambitious. The woman turns pink. The mask stays on, but her chances at royal favor vanish like a puff of lemon balm. This is how Versailles works. No daggers, no duels, just perfume, wit, and slow social ruin scented with violet. You start to understand why everything feels so fragile here. So feather-light and glass-thin. The court's power doesn't lie in laws or bloodlines. It lives in silks and rumors and which scent floats down the hall first. Still, you have to wonder, how long can something so delicate hold? Because outside the palace walls, another scent is rising. Not perfume. Not flowers. But something sourer. Earthier. Less refined. The musk of unrest. While Versailles debates lavender undertones and cedar balance, the people in Paris are starting to notice how many flowers bloom in the palace, and how few bloom in their window boxes. And all this fragrance, however lovely, is starting to smell less like beauty and more like mockery. Marie may be winning the perfume games inside, but the air beyond the gates is thick with resentment. And air, unlike perfume, can't be bottled. Not for long. You drift through a golden corridor now, past velvet curtains and tapestries that smell faintly of decades-old roses and waxed ambition. But something else wafts behind the scenes, an aroma sharper than politics, heavier than powdered hair, and just faintly suspicious. It's the scent of secrets. And here at Versailles, secrets don't get whispered, they get worn. Because perfumes, it turns out, didn't just cover sweat or signal favor. They hid things. You follow a footman down a hallway so polished you're afraid to breathe too hard. He's carrying a tray of letters, carefully sealed in wax, each one delicately dusted with fragrance. Not cologne. Not something you dab behind an ear. These are coded aromas, designed to do more than just please. They conceal. they distract. Sometimes they deliver. Marie Antoinette was no stranger to scented intrigue. In fact, some of the most dramatic letters sent from her hand were reportedly infused with rose or violet water, just enough for the recipient to know it came from her. A royal signature in scent form. But others? The ones that didn't come through official channels? Those were different. You arrive at a parlor where Count Axel von Fersen, Marie's rumored Swedish confidant, or possibly more than, you lean in. It's a love letter. Not explicit. This is Versailles, not a Netflix miniseries, but poetic, aching, unmistakably personal. And the scent? That's the key. It isn't the Queen's usual Hameau de la Rose. This is her private perfume, one known only to two people. A formula designed by Fargen and used strictly for clandestine communication. He even referred to it in his notes as lettres à minuit, midnight letters. It wasn't uncommon in the late 1700s to scent correspondence. But in Marie's case, it was practically strategy. Certain combinations meant burn after reading. Others meant send word safely. Still others signaled urgency, danger, or in one instance, don't trust the man holding this envelope. Historians still argue whether these scented codes were real policy or just desperate theater. But the timing of these letters, and the matching testimonies, paint a convincing picture. Scent was surveillance. And it wasn't just the Queen. Court ladies used similar tactics. A duchess might send her sister a scented note laced with violet, signaling that a suitor was loyal. Or slip a sachet of spiced cardamom into her husband's pocket, implying she knew about the laundress behind the stables. A favorite trick? Sending letters laced with iris root, pleasant at first, but nose-burning within hours. An aromatic threat disguised as perfume. And then there were the spy rumors. Some claimed that during high tensions with Austria and Prussia, Marie's perfumes were mixed with invisible ink that reacted only under heat. That revolutionaries used scent to mark loyalists. That certain nobles sniffed out dissent quite literally, sprigs of rosemary tucked into coats as a sign of resistance. One particularly wild story from 1788 involves a dinner guest noticing her wine goblet smelled of orange flower water. Innocent enough. But orange blossom was the signature scent of a known royalist salon. She excused herself and was never seen again. Coincidence? Likely. But at Versailles, paranoia has its own perfume. Fargen once commented privately that his perfume workshop felt more like a chapel and a confessional combined. People came to him with desires and secrets, fears and fantasies, all asking to be bottled and carried like prayer. You tiptoe into his lab again. The shelves are lined with hundreds of vials. No labels, just symbols. A daisy for the Queen. A tiny sword for a general. A cracked mirror for a duchess who reportedly smelled like betrayal. He never wrote down the recipes. Too dangerous. His memory, like his nose, did all the work. And still, there's one bottle missing. The Queen's emergency blend. A perfume created not to attract, but to confuse. Its purpose? To override her signature scent in case she ever needed to disappear. Crafted with notes of animalic musk, pungent ambergris, and bruised mint, it could linger on fabric for days, disguising even the strongest traces of Hameau de la Rose. Fargen kept it in a lead-lined case. Until, one day, it vanished. No one knows what happened. Thibaut, Fargen's apprentice, suspected it had been stolen by one of the Queen's handmaidens. Others thought Marie herself had taken it for a future escape. When the revolution hit, it was nowhere to be found. Some say it was used. Some say it's still hidden inside a music box. And some, those prone to drama, or perhaps just hopeful, claimed the scent reappeared once, during the Queen's final days, worn by a woman weeping into her skirts as she was led from her chamber. You leave the lab with your nose full of questions. Back in Versailles, the Queen leans over her writing desk. She dips her quill, writes 3 lines, seals the page, then opens a small tin of scented. You'd think all this perfume would grow tiresome. Headaches, allergies, fainting spells. But here, it's part of the ritual. Like bows, titles, powdered wigs. Like pretending everyone is honest and no one sweats. But beneath the fragrance, things are changing. The queen's scent no longer inspires admiration alone. For some, it's a warning. For others, a challenge. Because what once signaled softness, elegance, and unreachable glamour, now smells, to the people, like everything wrong with royalty. The same way a cracked pane lets in wind, Marie's perfume is letting in the future, faintly at first. A trace of ash under rose. A shadow behind sandalwood. And if you breathe deeply enough, even now you can smell it. Revolution is coming. And it's not wearing violets. You step into the queen's private dressing room at dawn, just as the light pours over gilded mirrors and clings to the lace of her bedchamber curtains like sleepy gold. It smells exactly how you'd expect, like pressed linens, wax polish, and perfume just beginning to warm on skin. But not just any perfume. Today, it's the queen's favorite, Hameau de la Rose. And oh, does she love it! You can almost see her inhale as her ladies-in-waiting pat a few final dabs of the rose-heavy blend onto her wrists and neckline. It's part of her routine, part of the story she insists on telling, not just to others, but to herself. This is the scent of her fantasy, milkmaids in ribbons, breezy meadows, hands uncallous yet rustic enough to be charming. No ink stains, no tax codes, no Paris. Just a perfume that smells like a fairy tale the queen dearly wants to live in. And to be fair, it's working. For a while. The public doesn't know the recipe, of course. All they know is what the court whispers, and what the perfume sellers across Paris pretend they know. Suddenly, everyone wants to smell like a royal pretending to be a peasant. The irony? Almost no one wearing it could find a real cow if it mooed into their ear. Still, Hameau de la Rose becomes a symbol. It's in every boutique. It's mimicked in powdered sachets worn on fans, rubbed into gloves, and stuffed into brocade pockets. Everyone in Versailles either smells like the queen, or wishes they could. Perfume merchants capitalize fast. They rename their bestsellers with increasingly absurd, yet trendy titles like Queen's Garden Waltz, Milkmaid Whispers, and, no joke, Elixir of Rural Virtue. One bottle even promises, smell as though you've milked a goat, with dignity. Fringe tidbit. At least 2 noblewomen were rumored to have visited actual farms in an effort to understand the pastoral essence of the scent. One reportedly fainted after stepping in something unscentable. She recovered, but her shoes did not. You wander out of the dressing room and into the stone hallways, where rumors move faster than feet. The perfume isn't just a fragrance now. It's a dividing line. You overhear a valet murmur to another, "If I smell rosewater before she speaks, it'll be a good day." "Unless it's the angry kind of rosewater," the other replies. There's a difference, apparently. Some say when the queen's Hameau de la Rose is paired with a certain powdered iris, it signals stress. Bad letters. Maybe an unkind editorial cartoon. Or worse, another rumor that her perfume costs more than a butcher makes in 3 months. Which might not be wrong. Historians still argue whether the queen truly believed her scent made her more relatable, or whether she clung to it as armor, floral, expensive, and carefully distanced from the rank odor of revolution. It's easier to breathe deeply when your world smells like carefully bottled calm. But beyond the palace? Street plays appear. One actor dressed as the queen sprays rosewater over starving peasants, declaring, "You don't need bread when the air smells pretty." The audience loves it. The play gets banned. So naturally, it's performed again the next week in someone's basement. A pamphlet surfaces titled "A Bouquet of Taxes," a sarcastic recipe for royal perfume. It includes ingredients like 2 tears from a hungry child, 1 lily picked by a footman who can't afford shoes, the crushed dream of a dressmaker, and 1 full spoon of powdered indifference. You can't help but laugh quietly. The satire is biting, but also strangely poetic. Even now, you wonder how a single perfume, a mixture of flower water and aristocratic escapism, could symbolize so much. That's the thing about smells, though. They sneak in. They're personal. They hit memory before logic. So when the queen's fragrance wafts too far into the city, people don't just wrinkle their noses, they react. They remember. They remember the stink of chamber pots, the reek of spoiled food, the perfume of desperation that no bottle can cover. They remember that their world doesn't smell like roses, and they begin to resent anyone whose world does. You walk now through a modest candle shop in Paris, where a few burned-out merchants are mixing replica perfumes for the masses. They don't have roses from Grasse or violets pressed by noble fingers, but they make do. You want the Queen's scent? One merchant asks a young woman. I'll give you jasmine and vinegar. Just enough to fool a drunk duke. She laughs. Not because it's funny, but because fooling anyone, even a little, feels like winning. Later that day, someone throws a perfumed rag into a crowded market square. People scatter coughing, not from poison but from pride. No one wants to be reminded that their ruler smells like fantasies while they reek of boiled cabbage. You pass a washerwoman wringing out shirts. She wears no scent, save the soap clinging to her knuckles. Her daughter asks, Mama, do queens smell nice all the time? She answers, not when they cry, darling. Then she goes back to scrubbing. The contrast is hard to miss. The queen's scent, once a symbol of charm and refinement, is beginning to unravel. It's no longer the smell of elegance. It's the smell of distance, of disconnection, of a woman playing milkmaid while real milkmaids can't afford soap. Still, Marie clings to her perfume. She reapplies it each morning. Fargen keeps tweaking it ever so slightly. Less rose, more moss, a touch of orris root for humility, a lie, but a well-intentioned one. But the air is changing. The same scent that once softened her image now hardens it. And soon, people won't want to wear it anymore. They'll want to burn it. But not yet. Tonight, the Queen steps into her garden. The air is warm, fragrant with Rio blooms. She breathes deeply, almost hopefully. For a moment, she believes the perfume is working. That it's still helping her connect. She's wrong. But she smells wonderful. You trail behind a shimmering train of silk, weaving through the hall of mirrors as evening sunlight spills across the marble. The chandeliers are catching fire with every footstep, though no flame burns, only reflection. Yet despite all the dazzle, all the flickering gold, the Rio battle is unfolding in whispers. And the weapon of choice? Fragrance. Versailles is a nose-first society now. Every gathering is an unspoken tournament of who smells best, boldest, or closest to the Queen. And while Marie Antoinette herself glides serenely through the court wearing her pastoral rose signature, there's trouble in the scented air. You catch the tension right away. One duchess, normally flowery and faintly powdered, has gone full citrus tonight. Sharp, almost medicinal. She's drawing attention for the wrong reasons. An account nearby raises an eyebrow as if to say, Lemon? Really? You'd think they were debating matters of state. But no, this is the Versailles version of open conflict, the war of the noses. The Queen's inner circle, smelling like her blend of rose and milk, exudes curated innocence. But her rivals? They've started plotting their own olfactory coups. Enter Madame de Genlis. Her perfume? A spicy jasmine clove concoction laced with blackcurrant and, some say, smugness. It's a direct contradiction to the Queen's softness. Where Marie wants to be seen as delicate, untouched by the political winds, Madame de Genlis wants to shout, I have opinions, and I'm wearing all of them. And people are noticing. Fargen, the Queen's perfumer, is summoned to her quarters weekly now. Not for repairs, but for strategy. Too many imitators, Marie sighs one morning, reclining on a chaise. And now they're making counterscents. Fargen winces. He's heard of them. One noblewoman, the Duchesse de Châteauroux, apparently commissioned a perfume meant to outflower the Queen. The result? Something so sweet it made a parlor boy cry. You know things are bad when a perfumed glove sends someone into melodramatic tears. Historians still argue whether these fragrance feuds were really about personal taste, or whether they were desperate plays for relevance in a court where everything, ran on symbols. A perfume wasn't just a smell. It was allegiance, class, power, and worse, all of this was visible. Everyone knew. At one soirée, the Queen enters the ballroom. The entire space goes still. Eyes dart. Fans flutter. And slowly, everyone edges just a little closer, trying to catch her scent and determine which version of Marie they're dealing with tonight. It's like guessing someone's mood based on candle choice. You, meanwhile, are stuck beside the Marquis de Lavoisier, who claims he can detect 38 different florals in a single whiff. He can't. But that doesn't stop him from narrating each one. Ah yes, I detect Bulgarian rose. Perhaps a trace of geranium? Definitely marigold. No, wait, just an aggressive iris. You excuse yourself politely before he gets to notes of crushed revolution. Back by the musicians, someone is coughing loudly. Not from illness, but from being seated between two ladies engaged in what can only be called fragrance warfare. One wears a smoky vetiver base, intense and masculine. The other wears a vanilla-lavender blend that smells like sugared innocence. They aren't speaking, but they are silently asphyxiating everyone within a 3-foot radius. And so the battle rages. Perfume bottles are now status symbols. There's even a waiting list to get Fargent's services. Lesser-known perfumers, sensing an opportunity, begin crafting what they call reformist blends. These scents are marketed as more natural, earthy, of the people. They contain ingredients like rain-soaked soil, apple peels, and, for some reason, hay. One even includes a note of unwashed linen which, while historically accurate for the lower classes, doesn't do well at parties. Still, the contrast is intentional. Those wanting to appear aligned with the growing unrest start favoring these rustic perfumes over the Queen's garden fantasies. The Queen, of course, knows. She smells it every time she walks into a salon, and someone smells like freshly churned butter on purpose. She reads it in the pamphlets that mock her for perfuming the clouds while the gutters overflow. She sees it in the way courtiers now hesitate before reapplying her signature scent. And so, she adapts. Fargent crafts a new blend, quieter, darker, less showy. The rose remains, but now it's late. They still associate her with milkmaids, meadows, and the scent of floral detachment. You overhear one courtier joke, the Queen's perfumes have seasons, but her country's patience does not. Brutal. Yet the war of the noses continues. A nobleman develops a scent called tax relief. It smells like rosemary and hope, and no one is quite sure if it's satire or sincerity. It sells out anyway. Meanwhile, revolutionaries outside the palace walls begin describing the Queen's fragrance not with admiration, but as a warning. If you smell roses, one pamphlet warns, run in the other direction. Someone rich and oblivious is nearby. By now, you can barely tell whether people wear perfume to express themselves or to protect themselves. Perfume is no longer a scent, it's a shield. One woman wears a bitter almond blend and declares herself free from Versailles influence. Another admits she still wears her mode de la rose, but only in secret, like contraband. Even Fargent feels the shift. His diary includes a note. They no longer want to smell like her. They want to smell like anyone else. In a final, desperate attempt to reclaim the scented crown, Marie hosts a perfume ball. Guests are instructed to arrive wearing original blends inspired by French virtues: liberty, loyalty, moderation. The irony isn't lost on anyone. You stand quietly by the refreshment table, watching as a woman in a powdered wig the size of a fruit basket struts past, smelling like roasted chestnut and ego. She wins most virtuous scent, which, in Versailles speak, means nothing. Later that night, as the ball winds down and candles flicker low, the Queen's fragrance drifts softly through the room. It's lovely, yes, but it feels like the last act of a long play. Even beauty, it seems, has a shelf life. And the court's nose is tired. You wake to the rattle of carriage wheels echoing across cobblestones, the dawnlit streets of Paris stretching wide with the smell of dew, horse sweat, and last night's overcooked stew. The fragrance hanging in the air? Not roses. Not violets. Not powdered anything. It's the scent of real life. And that's the problem. Back in Versailles, Marie Antoinette has spent years cultivating an aroma of effortless grace. Delicate rose gardens, warm hay, a hint of wood smoke like she's just walked out of a fairy tale cottage. But step into the markets, the bakeries, the linen-scented alleys of Paris, and that illusion splinters like sun-off glass. You push through the crowd at Les Halles and there it is, a wooden stall selling perfume bottles styled Queenly Musk. The label is a cartoon of Marie Antoinette, balancing a shepherd's crook and a bouquet of tax receipts. The bottle smells like powdered milk and bergamot, which is somehow both comforting and offensive. The stall owner shrugs. It sells, she says, but not because they like her. Out here, Marie's perfume isn't adored. It's studied, mocked, dissected. To the people, it represents the growing divide between Versailles fantasy and Paris reality. The Queen might smell like sunshine and silk. Out here, folks are lucky if they smell like bread. You pass a group of women, washerwomen, probably. One snorts, she thinks if she smells like a meadow, we'll forget she's never seen mud. Another one replies, I don't want my queen to smell like a flower. I want her to smell like work. That hits harder than it should. Historians still argue whether Marie's choice of fragrance was politically naive or intentionally manipulative. Was she trying to humanize herself? Or was it all just aesthetic theater with no real understanding of how it landed? Either way, the effect is clear. People don't want to smell like their queen anymore. They want her to stop smelling like anything lovely while they can't afford soap. The scent is no longer aspirational. It's antagonizing. You follow the voices deeper into the city. Pamphlets are being passed around again, hand-drawn, cheaply printed, mean. One new favorite features a scratchy etching of Marie spraying herself while a child begs for bread behind her. The perfume bottle reads, La Mesure, by Her Majesty. Rude? Sure. Effective? Devastating. Even the salons in Paris, once obsessed with Versailles trends, are shifting. The latest rage? Simplicite Parfume, simple perfumes made with local herbs, clean-smelling resins, and anything that doesn't scream luxury. One shop advertises a new blend made entirely of boiled sage and water. It sells out in a week. You step inside. A young woman behind the counter offers you a sniff. It's what honesty smells like, she says. The bottle is plain, labeled Reine d'Extra, nothing fancy. It smells like dried leaves and paper. It also smells like resistance. More people start wearing these humble scents. The perfumers who once catered to courtly whimsy pivot hard, fast. They rename their creations with names like Bread Before Blossom, Citoyenne's Choice, and No Lily for the Guillotine. One particularly bold entrepreneur releases a scent called Sans Culotte, which, ironically, includes zero pants but lots of clove. Meanwhile, back at Versailles, Marie remains largely unaware of just how deeply her perfume is offending the senses of her people. Or perhaps she knows, but doesn't know what to do about it. She doubles down on Hameau de la Rose. Orders a new bottle. Requests a version strong enough to last through long, disapproving looks and the press of advisors reminding her to spend less time among goats. She tries to soften it briefly. Has Fargen dilute the rose. Add chamomile. Less cream, more grass. But the shift isn't enough. It still smells like fantasy. Like privilege pretending to be gentle. The disconnect grows. You attend a small gathering hosted by a middle-class merchant family. There's wine, bread, laughter, but no scent. One woman, catching your glance, says, "We don't wear perfume anymore." It attracts flies. The joke lands. Barely. A silence follows, but it's not empty. It's heavy. Weighted with shared knowledge that this isn't about perfume at all. It's about resentment. About watching the court continue to waltz through flower-scented dreamscapes while Paris smells like ash and boiling laundry. Even among the bourgeoisie, those not yet starving, but no longer enchanted, the Queen's perfume has become a punchline. You hear it again and again. She smells like she's never held a coin. She smells like the taxes I paid last week. She smells like a garden I'm not allowed to walk in. And the worst one, muttered by a priest after Sunday Mass. The Queen perfumes her soul, but not her conscience. That one sticks. Fringe tidbit. There's a minor riot outside a perfumery in Rue Saint-Honoré. A rumor spreads that they're selling the Queen's latest fragrance at a discount, and a crowd gathers, not to buy, but to throw vegetables. The shop shutters for a week. Meanwhile, in Versailles, the queen continues her routines. The flowers are still clipped each morning. The bathwater is still scented. The handkerchiefs are still folded with drops of violet oil. But now, even her attendants hesitate before applying the perfume. It's no longer just a scent, it's a risk. Farjan begins experimenting with new ingredients again. He suggests sandalwood, clove, oak moss. Something earthier. Something realer. Marie considers it. But in the end, she chooses another bottle of Hameau de la Rose. You wonder if she can still smell what's coming. If the roses are still covering it up. Because underneath that delicate sweetness now, you swear you catch it, a new note. Something iron-tinged and hard. Something like firewood soaked in anxiety. And maybe, it comes in slowly, like most things in Paris, through the alleyways, the baker's shop, the breath of a child pressing their nose to a closed perfume boutique. At first, it's just a different mood in the market. A silence after someone mentions the queen's name. A pause, long and awkward, when a seller displays anything floral. Then, a strange little bottle appears. You spot it tucked between loaves of bread at a side stall. It's not fancy. No ribbon, no crest. Just a short brown glass vial labeled Parfum du Peuple. The seller, a woman with windburned cheeks and calloused hands, gestures toward it casually. Smells like us, she says. Not like her. You open the cork. It smells like soap. Faint herbs. A little pine, maybe. It doesn't linger. It doesn't seduce. But it feels honest. Like the corner of a home with clean sheets and hard bread. Like the scent of a woman who's never had time for illusions. That's when you realize, this isn't just perfume anymore. It's protest. Because while Marie Antoinette clings to Hameau de la Rose, her meadow-in-a-bottle dreamscape, the people of Paris are beginning to adopt scents that say something else entirely. Fragrance has become a quiet uprising. A silent shrug against powdered court airs. And occasionally, a full-blown rally cry. The Queen's perfume, once a trend, is now a target. In fact, it started showing up in some very unexpected places. You turn a corner and find a pamphlet vendor hawking the latest satire. This one's titled Reine de Fleurs? Reine de Faux? Queen of Flowers? More like Queen of Fools. The cover sketch shows Marie Antoinette tipping a perfume bottle over a wilting rose, while the caption reads, "May this flower eat cake." Not exactly subtle. But it gets worse. Fragrance bottles, real ones, or clever replicas, begin appearing in protests. Some are thrown. Some are crushed underfoot. One man fills his hat with lavender water and flings it onto the steps of the Hotel de Ville, shouting, "For your nose, Madam Queen." No one laughs. They cheer. Historians still argue whether these were spontaneous acts or cleverly orchestrated performances of symbolic defiance. Either way, it works. The perfume riots begin as whispers. At a cosmetics shop near Palais Royal, two women argue over the scent of a powder compact. One says it smells like Versailles. The other hurls it across the room. Outside a ribbon vendor, a young apprentice waves away a noblewoman's perfume with a scarf and mutters, "Smells like tyranny." Within weeks, perfumeries start shuttering their windows, not because of lack of business, but fear of backlash. Anything floral, anything luxurious, becomes suspect. The Queen's once adored fragrance has transformed from fashion to fire hazard. One bold apothecary, perhaps too bold, creates a perfume called Revolt. Its scent? Smoke, leather, vinegar, and something that smells disturbingly like scorched linen. He bottles it in rough clay jugs and offers them at market for the price of 2 loaves of bread. It sells out. That's the tipping point. Marie Antoinette hears of the unrest, the scent-based protests, the bottles being destroyed. Farjan delivers the news carefully, like a servant placing bad cheese on a silver tray. The Queen does not take it well. "I have worn nothing but dignity," she insists. If they hate that, they hate themselves. Farjan says nothing. He's already begun removing certain ingredients from his public recipes. Too risky now to stock. At one Versailles salon, a duchess arrives smelling of simple lavender oil. No base notes. No cream. Just clean, quiet, undetectable. When asked about her new perfume, she replies it doesn't offend anyone. It doesn't say anything. Exactly. Because saying nothing now is safer than smelling like royalty. You stroll through the Queen's garden, once a fantasy playground of perfumed goats and scripted simplicity. The flowers are still blooming, but the bees buzz louder than the laughter. Even the staff have grown hesitant. A gardener confesses, "We're ordered to plant more marigolds this season. No more roses. Too symbolic. Too dangerous." Even Marie's ladies-in-waiting start applying perfume only in private. One wears lemon balm and spearmint under her gown, hidden from public sniff. Another tells you, if you smell sweet these days, they assume you're rich. And if they think you're rich, they might think worse. It's not paranoia. It's scent logic. There's even talk of a woman arrested simply for smelling too nice on her way to the bakery. No evidence, no accusation, just suspicion based on aroma. The jailer reportedly said, "No one smells like violets unless they've stolen something. You can't make this up." Well, you could. But you don't have to. Fringe tidbit: during a market skirmish, someone reportedly stuffed a hollowed-out perfume bottle with pamphlets and anti-monarchy slogans. They left it in a tavern bathroom. The revolutionaries called it La Bombe Bouquet. It didn't explode. But the message did. You step into a small chapel as dusk settles over the city. Someone has lit incense, basic stuff, probably frankincense or myrrh, nothing too lush. Even God, it seems, is sticking to a simpler scent profile these days. Marie, though? She doesn't give up. At her next public appearance, she wears her perfume proudly. Head held high. Rose layered with musk, cedar, and resolve. A statement in every swirl. People notice. Some gasp. A child points and whispers, "She still smells like that." But no one speaks aloud. They don't have to. Because even in silence, even without words, they understand. Her perfume is not just a blend of rose and nostalgia anymore. It's resistance, arrogance, and blindness all bottled together. A luxurious echo in a time that smells like uncertainty. You lean on the edge of a shadowed windowsill, watching as the Queen's delicate scent wafts down the corridors like a beautiful ghost. Not gone yet, but no longer welcome. The bottle of Homo de la Rose remains on her vanity, untouched for days now, as though she's afraid even her reflection will turn against her. But perfumes, like secrets, find their way out. You're summoned to a side chamber, one of those tucked-away corners of the palace where candlelight flickers too slowly and voices seem to hang around like perfume long after the speaker is gone. Inside, a trio of royal attendants are gathered around a letter. Not just any letter. It's perfumed. You know the moment you step into the room. The air is laced with something so floral, so pointed, it practically sings its sender's name. The Queen. Only, this letter wasn't meant for them. It was intercepted. And that's where things begin to turn. Because it isn't a sweet little note about fashion or gardens or another fictitious chicken named after herself. It's coded, filled with vague references and metaphors. And it reeks of danger. Roses, yes, but roses covering something sour beneath. A secret meeting. A request for discretion and trust in these fragrant hours. Poetic, yes. Suspicious? Also yes. The scandal breaks quietly at first, like a perfume bottle slipping off a marble shelf and not shattering, just cracking. A few courtiers whisper of strange scented envelopes. He re-enters the story now, like a sandalwood-scented ghost. His connection to the Queen had long been gossiped over. Too frequent a visitor, too carefully perfumed for a casual acquaintance. The letters, they say, passed through him. And every one carried a specific scent. Lavender for affection. Jasmine for urgency. A secret blend of musk and violet when the message should be burned immediately. Historians still argue whether these perfume-coated correspondences were romantic, political, or simply desperate. What's known is that they were real, and that several of them were intercepted by those who wished the Queen no goodwill. You exit the chamber just as another valet stashes a perfumed envelope beneath his vest. He doesn't look back. Probably heading to deliver it to someone higher up, someone willing to trade scent for scandal. The rumors grow. They say the Queen is using perfume to smuggle messages to foreign powers. That the perfume paper itself is steeped in espionage. That the scent of a letter can tell you what side you're on, before you even open it. And soon, scent becomes suspicion. At the salons, ladies begin sniffing letters like food tasters before a royal banquet. "I won't read it unless it smells of nothing," says one countess. No rose, no clove, no treason. You wander down toward the Queen's correspondence room. The desk is neat, though you spot a drawer left slightly ajar. Inside, parchment, seals, a tray of powders, and tiny corked vials labeled in code. You lift one, Newt Douse. Another, silence. The last, retour. You don't need a codebook. The names are clear enough. Night, silence, return. Messages hidden in scent. Invisible ink for the nose. But the backlash is gaining speed. In Paris, a new pamphlet spreads like wildfire. Titled The Perfume Plot, it accuses the Queen of using fragrance to communicate with enemies of France. The cover illustration? Marie blowing floral powder into the face of a peasant child. It's cruel. Cartoony. Wildly inaccurate. It also prints 20,000 copies in a week. Now, any scented letter is suspect. Nobles start burning their own correspondence before it can be misinterpreted. One famously throws her entire writing desk into a canal, just to avoid the appearance of guilt. You return to Versailles to find the Queen tense. She still wears perfume, but not like before. The application is careful now. Almost apologetic. As though she's asking the scent itself not to betray her. Fargen is summoned again. He's instructed to remove anything too emotional. No violet. No honeyed florals. Only sober ingredients. Orris root, maybe? Sandalwood. A bit of thyme. He makes a blend that smells like morning. Marie wears it anyway. Fringe tidbit. One surviving letter from this era contains not only coded language, but scratch and sniff instructions. Yes, really. A smudge of rose for safety. A trace of civet for delay. It reads like a spy manual with a perfume counter. Back in the palace, courtiers become scent paranoid. One duchess insists her handmaids sniff every piece of mail before she reads it. A baron commissions gloves made of waxed linen to trap smell. No notes in, no fragrance out. And Fargen? He started locking his workshop. Rumors fly that the revolutionaries are planning to seize his scent formulas. That they believe some hidden clue lies in the Queen's favorite blend. That if they just decode the ingredients, they'll understand everything. Truth? There's no grand mystery. Marie wore roses because she wanted to be adored. She wrote perfumed letters because they made her feel remembered. She coded messages in scent because it was the one thing Versailles still believed in. But one night, a group of masked men break into a perfumery in Paris. They steal nothing. Just smash every bottle labeled with the Queen's blend and leave behind a note. No more dreams in bottles. That's when it becomes real. Perfume is no longer luxury. It's evidence. A scented envelope becomes a liability. A handkerchief pressed with lilac becomes a political act. Even Fargen begins to reconsider his art. He reportedly tells a friend, "I used to bottle beauty. Now I bottle blame." And the Queen? She writes less. She perfumes less. And when she does, it's with blends so faint, so uncertain, they might as well be nothing. You catch a whiff of her final letter, jasmine, faint and sorrowful, and realize something awful. Even her signature scent is fading. Even she knows what's coming. And the paper it's written on? Smells like goodbye. You drift into the late afternoon warmth of Versailles, where sun puddles on the parquet floors and silence thickens between stone walls that used to ring with laughter and lace. But today the air feels different. Less perfumed, more strained. Something's gone missing, not just hope, but scent itself. Marie Antoinette is seated near her bedroom window, fingers idle, eyes on the gardens. She hasn't reapplied her perfume. Not today. Not for the third day in a row. Instead, she dabs her handkerchief to her neck. It's damp with rosewater, but barely. Almost like she's trying to erase the smell as soon as it appears. You'd think this abstention would make her feel safer. But it doesn't. Because even when she wears nothing at all, people accuse her of smelling too sweet. She walks with a cloud of roses, they say. She smells like money does when it's not yours. There's no winning. You trail behind her as she moves through the private halls. Servants give small, uncertain bows. They don't look her in the eye. They don't inhale. They're not sure what's worse, smelling the Queen's perfume, or not smelling it. Because in Versailles, the absence of fragrance is its own kind of scandal. And so begins the myth of royal sweat. See, for years, the public was told, half jokingly, half seriously, that the Queen never sweated. Her skin was always cool. Her gowns always fresh. Her linens untouched by anything so vulgar as perspiration. She was, after all, not quite mortal. Or at least, she was expected to pretend she wasn't. But anyone who's walked through Versailles in midsummer knows the truth. It gets hot. Dresses have layers. Corsets dig in. Even monarchs glisten. So how did she keep up the illusion? Perfume. Lots of it. The Queen's attendants routinely changed her linens, refreshed her fans with drops of citrus oil, and even brushed her wigs with floral powders that masked any stray scents. When she walked by, people didn't just notice her, they noticed her aroma. Fringe tidbit: a visiting noble once fainted at court because he stood too close to Marie during a July reception. Not from adoration. From heatstroke and a highly concentrated cloud of white musk. Historians still argue whether the whole Marie never sweated idea came from palace PR, from her own insistence, or from the carefully maintained fantasy that women, especially royal ones, were ethereal beings immune to bodily functions. But even if she wasn't immortal, she smelled like someone trying to be. Which is, perhaps, where the problem began. Because her perfume, beautiful as it was, became less about pleasure and more about proof. Proof she belonged. Proof she hadn't aged. Proof she was still above it all. The scent itself, because when the people realized they could smell how disconnected she was, that she had enough wealth to curate her existence down to the air around her, they stopped seeing the Queen as charming. They started seeing her as fake. At court, a joke begins to spread. What do you get when you cross a shepherdess with a perfumer? Answer: a queen who's never milked a cow and always smells like she did. Harsh. But also, kind of clever. You hear worse in the salons of Paris. A new comic opera opens, La Bergère en Bottes, in which a queen-like character perfumes her cows before milking them. In one scene, she cries, "I must be loved by my sheep, or I'll surely wilt." It gets a standing ovation. Back in Versailles, even her allies start distancing themselves from her fragrance. One lady-in-waiting begins carrying a pouch of bay leaves instead, claiming it calms her nerves. Another switches to rosemary oil, in solidarity with the working poor, she says, adjusting a diamond bracelet. You watch Marie dab at her temples with a cool cloth. There's no scent. No powder. No illusion. Just a woman trying not to show that she's hot, tired, and a little scared. But here's the thing. The myth of the unsweating queen can't survive reality forever. Especially when revolution is near, and revolution, inconveniently, does sweat. In fact, it smells distinctly of crowds. Of unwashed linen. Of summer body heat packed into narrow streets. You step out into Paris one morning and get hit with it. The smell of motion, of voices, of tension stewing in the sun. And in contrast? The scent of rosewater now feels like a punchline. A Paris newspaper prints a fake advertisement for a new perfume, Odeur de Palace, for the lady who doesn't work but still wants credit. It includes notes of denial, powdered debt, and the faint regret of marrying a man who doesn't read his mail. Fringe tidbit: one apothecary develops a revolution scent that literally includes vinegar, soot, and wine dregs. It's worn more as irony than hygiene. You return to Versailles in time to see Marie preparing for another public appearance. Her dress is simpler than usual. Her face is pale. She picks up a bottle of Hameau de la Rose and hesitates. Then she puts it down. chooses lemon balm instead. Just one drop, behind each ear. You watch her walk through the crowd. It parts for her, politely, warily. She's not wearing her usual scent, but the absence is just as loud. A man near you mutters even her lies have changed brands. Later, she writes a letter to her daughter. The parchment smells of nothing. She signs it, folds it, and places it in a box with a single dried rose. You lean closer. The rose, too, has lost its scent. You trudge through the mid-morning bustle of the Marché des Enfants Rouges, where baskets clatter and vendors shout over fresh radishes and arguments. The city's alive in the way only Paris knows how, loud, layered, and faintly smelling of onion and smoke. You're here to find bread, maybe gossip, but what you find instead is perfume. Or rather, the opposite of perfume. Because something odd is happening. A woman pushes past you with a scarf over her face. Too much rose, she grumbles, even though there's no flower in sight. You follow her gaze and see a merchant fumbling with a glass bottle that's just shattered across the cobblestones. Its contents trickle through dust, sending up a mist of something floral. Not strong, but recognizable. The reaction is immediate. A group of bystanders cough, step back, and mutter as though someone just sneezed during a sermon. Versailles garbage, one man spits. She thinks we want to smell her dreams. The bottle hadn't even belonged to the queen. You wander into a side alley where an old perfumery used to stand. Its shutters are nailed closed. A crudely scrawled message across the door reads, "We smell our own sweat now." Inside, someone's overturned a shelf. Glass shards glitter like forgotten jewels. A single stopper, still corked, lies among the debris. You pick it up and smell it. Rose. Musk. Memory. A beat later you drop it again. You're not sure whether you feel nostalgic or embarrassed. Out on the street, the riot is beginning. It doesn't start with torches or chants. It starts with a scent. A man throws open a window and hurls a perfume bottle, just a little one, into the square below. It shatters with a pop and releases a brief cloud of lavender and honey. Someone screams. Not because they're hurt. Because they recognize the blend. It's hers. A voice yells. People scatter. A few throw rags over their mouths. One child holds his nose and cries. It's not that the scent is bad, it's that it's wrong. It doesn't belong here, in this square, in this heat, among these people. It's the smell of powdered indifference. Then someone else throws a bottle. Then another. And suddenly it's a perfume riot. Historians still argue whether this moment was orchestrated by revolutionaries or simply spontaneous combustion of outrage and symbolism. Either way, it spreads like wildfire, without flames, but with fragrance. One street over, a stall is set ablaze. Not for what it sells, fish, but for what it smells like. The vendor had started using old perfume bottles to store vinegar. Bad idea. By the time the sun reaches its peak, half a dozen perfumeries across the right bank have shuttered or been vandalized. The riots aren't about stealing. No one wants the goods. They want them gone. They want the air back. You duck into a side street cafe where someone is taping a sign to the window. It reads, "And no perfume allowed. We stink like people here." Inside, they're pouring tea and recounting the scent wars. One man laughs. "I used to like roses. Now I flinch when I smell them." Another woman sighs, "I wear soap now. Just soap." No one's angry about soap. The shift is undeniable. Fragrance, once luxury, now reads like propaganda. Even the simplest scent gets scrutinized. People sniff strangers on carriages. They wrinkle their noses at silk-clad ladies, even if they're just wearing lemon oil. A rumor circulates that a man was dragged off a tram because his wife had secretly rubbed his neck with ambergris. He denies it. They don't care. And the Queen? She hears of the riots, of course. She asks Farjan to come in secret. Not to create anything new, but to verify she hasn't accidentally worn something provocative. He checks her gloves, her fan, her pillowcase. All are neutral. Bare. Even bland. "You are scentless, Your Majesty," he says. She smiles. Sadly. That's almost worse, she replies. Because once, her perfume had power, influence, adoration. Now even nothing smells like guilt. You return to the streets later that week. A barricade has been set up near a once fashionable perfumery. The sign hanging from it reads, "We smell our lives, not your lies." It's clever. And painful. Nearby, a group of children are smashing empty bottles with sticks. Not out of malice, just boredom. But every pop, every glimmer of broken glass, seems to echo the larger collapse. One little girl collects stoppers and strings them on a cord around her neck. Why? You ask? They used to be magic, she says. Now they're just glass. You duck inside and see a woman trying on something that smells like rosemary and clay. She smiles. I just want to smell like I live in the same world as everyone else, she says. And there it is. The rebellion was never just about money, or power, or bread. It was about the distance. The gap between a queen in silk smelling like imaginary fields, and the people who actually walked them. Perfume, once the bridge between worlds, had become the moat. Now they're burning the drawbridge. Marie Antoinette, far from the riots, sits in silence. Her last bottle of Homme de la Rose remains untouched on her shelf. No one wants it. Not even her. She picks it up, turns it over once, then hides it in a drawer. And though her rooms are quiet, the absence of scent is louder than ever. It smells like the end of something. You step into the streets of Paris just as the day exhales its long, sour breath. The scent of this city is unmistakable. Stone warmed by sun, stale ale, soot, damp wool. A street corner exudes fried onions, a cellar wafts mold. A passing carriage leaves behind a trace of manure and faded lavender sachets crushed under its wheels. You sniff, just once, and realize this is the opposite of Versailles. Out here, the streets don't lie. They don't pretend. The smells are honest, chaotic, sometimes unbearable, but always real. If the Queen's perfume once floated above the mess of the world, this is the world punching back. You walk past the Seine and its oily swirls of refuse. Laundry flaps like flags between alley windows. Someone is boiling fish bones. Someone else is burning leather scraps. A young boy pees against a stone wall and goes right back to juggling apples for coins. And somehow, all of this smells less offensive to the people than a single note of rose. That's saying something. The city, they say, was never clean, but now it smells angrier. Like it's fed up with being sweetened. Like it resents the lie of Versailles and all its powdered optimism. You duck into a small apothecary near Rue Montorgueil, where a clerk is rearranging dusty jars of dried herbs. She notices you, pauses, and gestures at a display of small linen sachets. New blends, she says. No florals. Don't worry. You pick one up. It smells like clove and vinegar. Another, cedar and ash. A third simply reads sweat and soap and does exactly what it promises. She smiles. It's what people want now. Something trustworthy. You nod. You get it. Back in Versailles, Marie Antoinette's carefully constructed olfactory world is starting to crumble under the weight of its own fiction. The garden perfume, the milk baths, the scented gloves, none of it means what it used to. Now, each luxurious scent feels like an insult. A pretty ribbon tied around a bruise. And meanwhile, out here, the public has built its own scent profile: vinegar rinses, garlic breath, soot, iron, firewood, fear. The contrast is almost comedic. Fringe tidbit: one newspaper columnist claimed the true smell of revolution was gunpowder and onions. Another suggested it was wet bread and hot breath. Neither sounds particularly romantic, but that's kind of the point. Historians still argue whether the stench of Paris played any real role in fueling discontent, or if the assault on royal perfumes was simply symbolic. But as you wade through the living, breathing, sneezing city, it's hard to ignore how much more visceral everything feels when no one bothers to hide it behind orange blossom. You pass a bakery and catch a whiff of yeast and ash, and for a brief second, it almost smells luxurious. Then someone slaps wet laundry on a stoop, and the moment is gone. At the center of it all, a rumor spreads. They say the Queen has banned perfume in her inner chambers. They say she can no longer. You walk past the pamphlet stand where a new caricature catches your eye. Marie Antoinette, perched atop a perfume bottle like a throne, holding a daisy to her nose while rats scurry at her feet. The caption? Le nez de l'oubli, the nose of forgetfulness. Brutal. Across the city, people are reclaiming their right to smell human. Not floral, not powdered, not like they've walked through a curated dreamscape, but like themselves. And sometimes, that means leaning into the funk. A group of market workers joke that they're starting a new perfume line called Fermentation. The scent description includes cabbage, firewood, and the crust behind your ear. One guy offers to rub a garlic clove under your collar for realism. You politely decline. But you understand the sentiment. Because for them, the Queen's scent doesn't represent beauty anymore, it represents denial. A refusal to acknowledge the rot in the walls, the hunger in the stomach, the anger in the air. You wander toward a square where someone's hanging laundry. Each sheet flutters like a flag, sunlit and steaming. One woman spritzes her linens with lemon water. Just lemon. Nothing sweet. Nothing floral. She catches your look. Just want them to smell like clean, she says. Not like lies. Even the concept of clean has changed. You remember that the court used to define cleanliness not by bathing, heaven forbid they sweat, but by scent. A strong enough perfume meant you were clean, even if you weren't. It was like spraying over mold instead of scrubbing it off. Now, Parisians scrub. They boil clothes. Rinse sheets. Soak their feet in vinegar. Not because they've suddenly become hygienic purists, but because they want to smell like people who live, not people who pretend. And that means sweat. It means wood smoke. It means honesty. Fringe tidbit. One revolutionary leader was said to use eau de cologne not to smell rich, but to cover up the stink of the men he interrogated in a basement with no ventilation. Even justice needs a barrier sometimes, he said. You make your way back toward the Seine, watching a child play with a broken perfume bottle like it's treasure. He's filled it with river water and pretends it's magic. Smell this, he says, grinning. You do. It smells like mud and adventure. And something else, freedom, maybe. Not the powdered kind. The real kind. You look up and see the city stretching out like a canvas of bricks and breath. No illusions. No fantasy. Just life, in all its raw, aromatic complexity. Back at Versailles, they can't smell this. The Queen, behind her velvet curtains, surrounded by silence and a single sealed bottle, cannot smell her people anymore. And worse, they can still smell her. They know exactly what privilege smells like. They know what powdered milk and rose water and denial smell like. And they want none of it. They want vinegar, and wood smoke, and garlic, and bread, and sweat. You inhale deeply and catch the full bouquet of a city waking up to itself. It isn't pretty, but it's real. And right now, that's worth everything. You wake to the sounds of boots and broom handles on cobblestones, a makeshift parade of angry shoemakers and breadwives chanting their frustrations straight through the Rue Saint-Antoine. Their banners flap like laundry and smell just as strong. Not from perfume, of course. From sweat, charcoal, cabbage soup, and defiance. You step into the morning air, which today is laced not with florals but with smoke from last night's protest. Someone burned a royal pamphlet stand. Others threw dried herbs in the flames, rosemary, sage, wormwood. Not to sweeten the message, but to sour the palace's imagined atmosphere. And overhead, the wind carries it straight toward Versailles. Because by now, the people aren't just angry about perfume. They're angry about what it meant, what it covered, what it refused to acknowledge. And in this volatile mood, the idea that a woman could spritz herself into innocence was starting to feel like a national insult. Could a scent really spark sedition? Historians still argue about that. Some say no, revolution is born from hunger, not jasmine. From taxes, not tuberose. Others suggest that symbols matter more than facts. That when a queen wears the smell of untouched fields while the real ones rot, it does something to the soul of a nation. And you? Well, you just watched a man throw an empty perfume bottle at a painting of Louis XVI and shout, "This is what her flowers are worth." So yes. Yes, maybe it could. You pass a cafe where a new pamphlet is making the rounds. It features a sketch of Marie Antoinette's silhouette wafting perfume across a breadline. The tagline reads, "Let them smell cake." It's satire, yes, but close enough to the truth that it stings. In one corner, a man is telling a story, a rumor, more likely, about how the queen had perfumed her carriage so strongly during a public appearance that the peasants nearby fainted. Another insists her rooms are so saturated in scent that birds refuse to land on her windowsills. Even pigeons hate her perfume, he says. Everyone laughs. It's probably untrue. But that hardly matters now. Because stories like this, repeated and rhymed and shouted and scribbled, become bigger than their accuracy. They become cultural memory. They become reasons. You find yourself wandering through the outer neighborhoods, places where linen is patched, children go barefoot, and perfume is something spoken of like a mythical beast. Exotic. Threatening. Too expensive to ever be real. Outside a butcher's stall, two women argue over whether a bar of soap is too royal. One smells it and recalls. "No rose," she says. "No mint. I'll take the plain tallow." That's the new patriotism, to reject the rose. One of the local soap makers has caught on. She sells bars stamped with a cracked crown and labeled per de pupil. They're rough, gray, and smell like vinegar and lavender in the faintest trace. They sell out daily. And across the river, a student group is handing out flyers inviting people to a scent-free rally. The invitation reads, "Come as you are. Smell as you do. No masks, no roses." You feel a shiver behind your ribs, not of fear, but of realization. A scent can be more than pleasure or disguise. It can be ideology. Identity. It can place you on a side whether you like it or not. And somewhere deep in Versailles, Marie Antoinette still doesn't fully grasp it. She knows people are upset. She knows the riots have reached the periphery of her world. But she still believes that wearing a different dress or choosing a less floral scent will make the difference. Farjan brings her a new vial, one he calls Broom Matinale, morning mist. It's subtle. Clean. Barely there. He explains that it's meant to evoke dew, not decadence. She dabs it at her collarbone. "Will they like this one better?" she asks. Farjan doesn't answer. Because there is no answer that won't hurt. Fringe tidbit. A mock trial was held in a tavern cellar, with a mannequin dressed in silk representing the queen. Her only crime? Smelling like someone who's never worried. The jury sentenced the mannequin to be dunked in a vat of turnip water. Back in Paris, graffiti appears on the walls of a once-respected perfumer's shop, and no fragrance can hide your fate. It stays there for days. The perfumer eventually closes down. Not out of fear, but out of futility. No one wants beauty. You keep walking. Past the bookbinders. Past the bakers. Past the places where the air is sharp with steel filings or sugar dust. At one corner, a woman has set up a booth with oils she claims are revolution safe. Mint. Thyme. Raw pine sap. "I don't sell dreams," she says. "Just distraction." You test one. It smells like walking into a cold stone cellar full of drying herbs and silence. And honestly, it feels like peace. But still, at night, when the wind shifts, the queen's scent lingers over the rooftops. Barely. Like a memory that refuses to fade. And people notice. They still talk about her smell with loathing, yes, but also a strange kind of awe. She's become a walking contradiction. A woman both hated and too beautiful to ignore. A scent too delicate for a time this rough. Could a single perfume have pushed a people over the edge? No. But it certainly didn't pull them back. Not when the air was full of smoke. and bread cost more than roses. And the queen still smelled like a season no one else could afford. You wake to the distant sound of glass being smashed. Not the shriek of a dropped wine bottle. Not the delicate tinkle of someone knocking over a goblet in Versailles. This is different. Purposeful. Rhythmic. A cracking, echoing sound that carries through the air like a warning. You follow the noise through the back alleys of the city, where the smell of smoke is thick, and voices are thick with purpose. You're drawn toward an open square, a public gathering point that now resembles something between a protest and a bizarre kind of marketplace. There are people everywhere. Children holding signs. Women standing on crates. And in the center? A long wooden table piled high with perfume bottles. Hundreds of them. Ornate crystal stoppers. Worn glass jars. A few still sealed in their original packaging, tied with pale ribbons. Most, though, have been opened already. The air smells dizzying, rose, musk, orange blossom, civet narrowly. And underneath it all, a burned pile is smoldering. You've arrived just in time for the burning of decadence. That's what they're calling it. La Purge Parfumée, the perfumed purge. A group of women, mostly shopkeepers, seamstresses, laundresses, step forward one by one. Each holding a bottle, each with a story. Some shout. Some whisper. Some don't speak at all. I wore this while I starved, one woman says, tossing her perfume onto the pile. The glass shatters. The liquid hisses as it hits flame. This one was a gift from a man who never knew my name. More bottles fly. This one belonged to my employer. She made me polish her shoes while she bathed in lilies. And then, someone holds up a pale green bottle with a gold embossed M. Marie's perfume. Or a copy of it anyway. Maybe real, maybe fake. Doesn't matter. It gets the loudest cheers when it bursts. The scent rises like ghostly defiance, mixing with the smoke and the sweat of the crowd. It drifts across rooftops, floats down chimneys, seeps into the stone. You can practically hear Versailles wince. Historians still argue whether this event actually happened, or whether it was exaggerated in later revolutionary storytelling. Some say it was staged for impact. Others swear they saw it with their own eyes, glass flying like confetti, perfume sizzling like holy oil in reverse. What is certain, after this day, perfume was never seen the same again. You turn your gaze to the sidelines. Among the spectators is a young perfumer's apprentice. She looks nervous. She clutches a small satchel under her coat, probably containing her own formulas, her life's work. She doesn't approach the fire, but she doesn't leave, either. You move closer. She sees you, shrugs. I used to think perfume was magic, she says. Instead, you wander the edges of the riot. Not violent, but loud. Determined. This isn't a royal execution. It's a symbolic one. Each bottle represents something more than scent, waste, extravagance, ignorance. A queen who soaked herself in lavender while people boiled leather scraps to make soup. The bonfire roars. A man plays a fiddle nearby. He doesn't sing, just plays something slow, something sad. The music wins between the smoke trails like a counterpoint to the anger. One woman drops a final bottle into the blaze and says, almost tenderly, it really did smell beautiful. But it doesn't belong to us. Fringe tidbit. Some records claim a group of radical artists used the ash from burned perfume labels to mix pigment for protest posters. The posters bore slogans like "No more masks," "Down with scented silence," and "Smell the truth." You pause as the fire begins to die down. The square is quiet now. Tired. The people disperse, leaving behind only the scent. Not the perfume, it's been burned away. But the real scent: smoke, sweat, stone. It's oddly comforting. You head back toward Versailles. Along the road, you pass carriages that no longer carry flowers. Shops with blank windows where perfume ads once stood. One is shuttered with a note: "We sell soap." No dreams. Inside the palace, the mood is brittle. Word of the purge has reached Marie. She sits in her boudoir, surrounded by silence. Her fingers drift to her vanity out of habit, but the crystal tray is empty. No bottles. No flacons. Just a single cloth, once scented, now dry. You watch as she reaches for it, pauses, and lets her hand fall. I thought they wanted beauty, she murmurs. You don't know how to answer. Maybe they did. But not like this. Not when beauty became something they could never afford. Not when scent became a wall instead of a bridge. She stands, walks to the window, and opens it. For a moment, a breeze carries in the ghost of the fire. A trace of vinegar. Burnt rose. She breathes it in. She doesn't flinch. I suppose, she says quietly, even flowers rot. You think of the square. The bottles. The cheers. The way people stood in the street, arms raised, letting go of something they once thought they needed. And you wonder, not for the first time, what else will have to burn before the air clears. You wake to the distant thrum of soap kettles bubbling and windows creaking open. The city smells. Raw today. Not sweet. Not rotten. Just honest. You shuffle out into the narrow streets of Paris, where revolution brews not just in speeches and printing presses, but in soapboxes, both literal and ideological. And here, wedged between the fishmonger and a man selling eggs, you stumble upon something odd. A table lined with jars, mismatched and unlabeled. Behind it stands a woman in a threadbare apron and smudged cheeks. She isn't calling out prices. She isn't even smiling. Just waiting. You approach cautiously. Perfume? You ask. She scoffs. Not anymore. This is scent for us. You raise a brow. Not Versailles scent, she clarifies. Not powdered lilies or fake rainwater. This is our smell. You unstop one jar. The scent hits you immediately, sharp, metallic, and herbal. It smells like dried sage, cold iron, sweat-damp wool, and a touch of mint. It smells like revolution in a bottle. What do you call this one? She smirks. Fraternité. You nod. She pulls out another. This one's earthier, mud, tobacco leaves, a hint of lemon rind. It smells like someone who works with their hands. Someone who's never... You laugh a little. It's a bitter laugh. It smells better than it sounds. Because now, the working class has its own perfume. Not of luxury, but of presence. Not to pretend, but to claim. Historians still argue whether these counterscents were made out of protest, poverty, or pure creativity. But what's clear is this: the monopoly on scent was broken. Perfume no longer belonged to the elite. It belonged to whoever had an idea, a nose, and a bit of courage. Fringe tidbit: one underground pamphlet even included recipes for homemade citizen scents using vinegar, soot, and lemon peel, offering them as alternatives to traitorous flowers. You carry a jar with you as you walk, the one called Fraternité. Each sniff is a reminder: you are not ornamental. You are part of something. Along the alleys, others are doing the same. Men with coal-streaked arms dab oil behind their ears. Women baking bread smear waxy salve on their sleeves. Children scent their pockets with mint leaves, not because it's pretty, but because it smells like home. Even in the cafes, the change is evident. People lean in closer now, not afraid of each other's smells. If someone reeks of effort, it's a compliment. If someone smells of soap, it's a badge of effort, not elegance. Versailles? No one wants that smell anymore. Too curated. Too fragile. Too far away. You step into a small tailor's shop where the air used to hum with lavender and starch. Now, just cedar, salt, and a hint of vinegar. A seamstress wipes her brow with a kerchief that smells faintly of time. Better than perfume, she says. At least this doesn't lie. Outside, two young men argue over who gets the last jar of soot bomb. It smells like my father's forge, one says proudly. Exactly, says the other. It smells like real life. They settle it the Parisian way, by splitting it. In a tiny bookstall nearby, a woman lays out pamphlets next to vials. Literature and liberation, she offers. One for the mind, one for the nose. You ask what's in hers. She shrugs. Orange rind and wine-soaked ink. It smells like rebellion at 2 a.m. You buy one. It smells like last chances. And in all of this new wave of olfactory defiance, the queen vanishes further. She's still in Versailles, still surrounded by marble and hush, but the world has moved on. Her perfume doesn't matter anymore. Her image has cracked, her scent has soured. Even the rumors about her perfume have started to fade, not because they've stopped being cruel, but because people have stopped caring. They're too busy making their own. In a courtyard just off Rue Saint-Honoré, a group of artists host a scent gathering. Not a salon. No powdered wigs. No limoncello. Just shared oils, herbs, roots, and stories. A woman stands and tells of losing her job at a perfumery because she refused to stop selling lavender to servants. A man speaks of using ashes from his chimney to create something that smells like quiet rage. Another whispers about bottling the scent of goodbye, ashes, mint, and silence. You sniff that one. It makes your chest ache. Fringe tidbit. A traveling actor begins selling satirical perfume reviews where he describes new revolutionary scents in poetic exaggeration. One mock scent, Rancid Aristocrat, is said to feature notes of spoiled cream, abandoned gardens, and denial. You stop in front of a bakery with windows fogged from heat and dough. The air smells rich, yeast, smoke, roasted flour, and yet someone nearby wears a blend of pepper and sage that makes you pause. New scent? You ask? The baker nods. Made it myself. Call it pain quotidien. Daily bread. And there it is. It's folded plain, sealed in wax, and carries the subtle scent of ash. She opens it anyway. Inside, a single phrase written in uneven script. You can't bottle a kingdom. She closes the letter and sets it aside. She doesn't cry. She doesn't reach for her perfume. She just sits very still. Because deep down, she understands. You can wear roses. You can bathe in violets. You can float above the sweat and smoke for a little while. But eventually, the world catches up. And when it does, it smells like everyone else. The air feels different now. You wake to the distant clatter of wheels on cobblestone, and the rustle of fabric being bundled hastily into trunks. A coachman shouts. A door slams. Someone curses softly in a dialect that doesn't belong to Paris anymore. Perfume makers are fleeing the city. Not en masse, not yet, but in quiet pairs and cautious families, slipping away like the last traces of Nerleon skin. You catch sight of one just as dawn breaks. A stout man with a box strapped to his back, its bottles wrapped in linen and prayer. He doesn't look back. And why would he? The scent business has become dangerous. You trail him through the twisting alleys behind the Seine. He pauses only once, outside the building that used to house his workshop, a once gilded corner now smeared with charcoal graffiti. It reads, "No more masks. No more myths." He touches it. Not to clean it, but as a kind of goodbye. Then he moves on. Historians still argue whether the great fragrance flight of the late 1780s was an economic necessity, a political act, or just self-preservation. Likely all three. By now, even the idea of making perfume for the aristocracy could mark you as suspicious. So they left. Quietly. Carefully. With them went recipes, generations of them, locked in memory or scribbled into coded ledgers. Names like Fargen, Hubigant, and Lubin. Some took to boats for England. Others crept toward the border in carts meant for vegetables. More than one disguised themselves as musicians. And their cargo? Secrets. Little glass time capsules. The Queen's true scent, her real preferences, the blends that never made it to market because they were too intimate, too telling. Fringe tidbit. One apothecary reportedly baked formulas into loaves of stale bread to smuggle them out. To any customs officer, it was just a slightly fragrant snack. You find yourself at a border town days later, your boots dusty, your nose trained now on things subtler than perfume. The scent of fear, for example, tight and bitter. Or hope, which often smells like wax paper and wood smoke. There's a man sitting at a roadside bench, sharpening quills with a tiny knife. He's not a perfumer, but he's carrying one of their boxes. What's in it? You ask. He glances around. Opens it just a crack. Inside are 3 small vials, 2 sealed ledgers, and 1 silk handkerchief faintly stained with something floral and warm. He doesn't let you sniff. You can't breathe what she wore, he says, half winking. Not unless you plan to leave with us. You almost asked her who, but you already know. Marie Antoinette? Because even as the revolution burns hotter, her scent remains valuable, not as a commodity, but as a symbol. Owning it is like owning a relic. Knowing the recipe is like knowing a spell. And now? People will pay to forget her, or remember her, depending on their politics. You follow the man to a ramshackle cottage outside the village. Inside, 4 others are waiting. 2 are former perfumers. One's a bottle cutter. They uncork a tiny bottle and hold it beneath your nose. Not to tempt, but to teach. It smells like violet leaves crushed under silk. Honeyed hay. A memory of walking through tall grass at dusk while wearing too many rings. She called this one soir de lait, the bottle cutter murmurs. Evening of milk. You blink. It's beautiful. It's dangerous. They put the stopper back on quickly. Because out here, in the open, that smell could cost them everything. Fringe tidbit. There were whispers of a secret scent vault hidden beneath a convent near Rouen, where fleeing perfumers stored master bottles and ledgers. No one ever confirmed it, but the myth lingers like bergamot. You leave the cottage and keep walking. South, maybe? Or east. It doesn't matter. The scent has changed everywhere. Even the air in small towns smells different now, leaner, sharper, scrubbed of decadence. You pass a shop where lavender still grows in clay pots, but no one dares call it perfume. Now it's medicine. Moth repellent. Remembrance. In one dusty village square, a boy sells anti-royal blends made of garlic water and burnt toast. Guaranteed to make you smell like you've never met a noble, he says, grinning. You buy one. Just for the joke. But when you dab a bit behind your ear, no one flinches. That's how far the world has turned. And in England, the first whispers of the French scent exodus begin to circulate. London perfumers start marketing their new wares with slogans like formulas saved from the guillotine, and wear what the Queen once feared to smell. One shop claims to sell Marie's personal blend. Another insists they've improved it. Both smell almost right. Almost. But something's missing. Back in Versailles, the perfumer's absence is noticeable. Marie Antoinette no longer receives her monthly tray of samples. No longer tests floral waters on linen. Her boudoir feels still, stale. Her personal stock is dwindling. She's careful now, measured. Just a single drop behind one ear. Just enough to recall who she was, not enough to invite outrage. She asks a servant one day, "Do you think anyone will remember how I smelled?" The servant doesn't answer. But you know the answer. Because even now, in scattered corners of France and across the Channel, there are people bottling whispers. Curating invisible portraits of a woman history is already reshaping. Not through paintings. Through perfume. Because when memories fade, sometimes only the scent lingers. And if it lingers long enough, it becomes legend. You find yourself following a trail of half-whispers and old drawer scents, those faint traces of dried rose, paper glue, and dust, into a story nearly lost. A story about something small, glass, precious, and missing. The tale begins, as these things often do, in the locked chamber of a forgotten cousin. Marie Antoinette, weeks before the Bastille falls, supposedly sends her maid to hide a bottle. Not just any bottle. The bottle. The last flagon of her favorite blend. Some say Hameau de la Rose, others argue Soir de lait, still others claim it was a custom variation never sold to anyone else, never even replicated. All we know! It smelled like silk gloves, dried daisies, goat's milk, and an uncomfortable kind of innocence. The bottle never reappears. No records. No recovery. Not after the palace is stormed. Not after the inventories. Not even when looters go drawer to drawer. You follow rumors. A priest who insists he heard of it buried with a hairbrush in the garden of a convent. A jeweler who says he sold the stopper in secret to a noblewoman in exchange for exile papers. A chimney sweep who claims it was shattered under a boot during the palace raids and swept into the ashes. Each version smells a little different. Each version has its own ending. Fringe tidbit: a 1792 playbill advertised a performance called The Perfume of Treason, in which a fake bottle of Marie's fragrance was used as a plot device to hypnotize loyalists into dancing themselves to death. You land eventually in the quiet town of Meaux, where a retired apothecary named Bastien runs a garden shop and speaks only in the past tense. He doesn't advertise it, but word on the street says he has a bottle. You find him bent over a bed of crushed thyme and lavender, his knuckles gnarled like driftwood, and his shirt stiff with dried herbs. You ask? He pauses, wipes his hands. Then, very slowly, he pulls out a small iron box from beneath the counter. Inside, cloth, twine, and something delicate cradled like a child. A bottle. Greenish glass, faintly clouded by time. A pale stopper. And a handwritten label, just a single cursive letter, M. You lean in. You can smell it, Bastien says, but don't breathe too hard. There's not much left. You nod, cautiously lifting the bottle to your nose. It's faint. Barely there. But you catch it, hay drying in summer sun, rose petals stuck in an apron, milk turning just slightly sweet. And under it all, something melancholic. Like longing aged in a jar. It's not perfect. But it's powerful. You ask him how he came by it. He shrugs. My mother's aunt was a chambermaid. Claimed she found it under a floorboard wrapped in a linen monogrammed with fleur-de-lis. Could be real. Could be a lie. You ask why he kept it. He looks away. Because it's the only part of her no one's fought over. That hits harder than you expect. Because while her hair was cut, her dresses burned, her memories shamed and sanctified and dissected, no one ever weaponized the bottle. It was too small. Too quiet. Too fragrant. You thank him and walk away, half dreaming descent into your memory. And now, whenever you pass someone wearing a faint blend of rose and hay, your heart skips. Could it be? Probably not. But maybe. That's how legends work. Back in Paris, the tale of the vanished bottle becomes part of revolutionary folklore. Some claim it was deliberately hidden to curse whoever found it. Others insist it contains the Queen's final wish, soaked into cloth, waiting to be released. At least one rogue perfumer tries to replicate it. He names it Oubli, the Forgotten One. It doesn't sell well. Too haunted. Too sad. But among a niche group, artists, poets, nostalgic royalists, it becomes a collector's grail. Bottles change hands under the table. Letters are exchanged, always coded. The question hangs heavy in the perfume world. Which one is the real one? Or worse, is it lost forever? Historians still argue. Some swear the bottle was never real. That it was invented to give her story a softer ending. Others believe it's still out there, sealed and waiting. A single drop left to remind the world of a woman who, for all her excess, loved the smell of earth. And you? Well, you still dream about it. In your sleep, you walk the halls of Versailles. No one else is there. The air is quiet. The windows are open. And from somewhere far away, a drawer, a hollow wall, a memory, you smell it again. Soft, just a scent, drifting through time like a message in a bottle no one dares open. The revolution didn't just topple a monarchy, it burned its scented veil to the ground. And yet, as you step into post-revolutionary Paris, something curious clings to the edges of everything: hesitation. A pause in the air, like the city has forgotten how to breathe in without suspicion. You smell it right away: ash, starch, new ink, the bitter trace of fierce sweat. But one thing is conspicuously absent: perfume. It's not just unfashionable now, it's taboo. Dangerous. Socially radioactive. To wear scent in public is to invite side eyes and sharp questions. Who are you trying to impress? The guillotine? In the market, a woman drops a lemon peel into her apron pocket and nervously glances around. For freshness, she mumbles. A man brushes cologne off his collar like it's dandruff. You wander the stalls, noticing how vendors now label things cleaning oils, stain removers, or even herbal polish rather than admit they might smell nice. Scent is no longer luxury, it's camouflage. Fringe tidbit. In 1794, a city ordinance allegedly forbade the sale of any fragrance associated with pre-Republican femininity. How you enforce that, nobody knew, but the fear stuck. Soap is okay, but only if it's unscented. Candles are acceptable, so long as they smell like wax and not roses. Even public fountains, once tinged with orange blossom for the benefit of strolling nobles, now flow clean and plain. Historians still argue whether this perfume paranoia was truly political, or whether people simply couldn't afford the luxury anymore and decided to moralize the loss. We rejected scent, they claim. But maybe scent had already rejected them. You sit in a modest salon, once a perfumery, now a soap-cutting workshop, and watch the owner carve blocks like stone. His hands are stained from lye and lemon. No one wants to smell like anything anymore, he says. It's safer to be invisible. You nod. Because everywhere you go, the city smells like erasure. Even the revolution has a scent now, and it isn't one anyone's bottling. Gone are the powdered wigs and perfumed gloves. Gone are the scented pouches sewn into skirts. Gone is the daily mist of violet water across powdered shoulders. Instead, you catch other smells. Bleach, ink, candle smoke, boiled starch. Cleanliness has become the new nobility. But there are rebels even now, quiet ones. In a corner of the Marais, a young widow sells Republican oils out of her pantry. She claims they're for polishing furniture. You know better. The subtle note of geranium says otherwise. She winks. For when you want the house to smell liberated, you lift the lid of a tin marked cabbage bomb. Inside, the unmistakable trace of sandalwood. Scandalous. Subtle. Sublime. You buy two. Later that day, you pass a theater, its posters soaked in vinegar to prevent mildew. One actor whispers to another, "Your neck still smells like orange flower." The other hisses, then cut it off. They don't mean his neck. They mean the collar. But still, you feel the chill. You duck into a coffee house and sit near a group of printers debating news slogans. One suggests, "No perfume, no pretenders." Another counters, "Truth smells like sweat." They all laugh, but the humor is tight. This is no longer about class, it's about survival. Scent is seen as deception, nostalgia, even betrayal. And yet, in the back corner, a young woman opens a notebook and dabs her wrist with something hidden. She leans in and breathes. Her face softens. You don't ask. You know. You've done it too. Because you visit a former perfumer now selling vinegar. He doesn't advertise what else he makes. But if you know to ask for bitter rinse, he'll slide you a vial wrapped in paper. It smells like burnt sugar and thyme. Good for grief, he says. You take it. Because even revolutions need comfort. Fringe tidbit. A tiny underground booklet circulated in 1796 called The Invisible Bouquet, listing recipes for unsmellable scents. Perfumes meant only for the wearer, undetectable unless you stood too close. It was banned, of course, which made it wildly popular. You return to your lodgings that night with a satchel full of secrets. They don't glitter. They don't shout. But when you unstopper the sandalwood tin, your entire chest exhales. The world isn't ready for scent. But you are. Because even in the stripped-down streets of post-revolution Paris, your body remembers how to respond. How to soften. How to feel, more than survival. Maybe that's why they fear it. Because scent isn't just decoration, it's emotion. Memory. Desire. The opposite of silence. And so, quietly, a few bold souls begin the slow work of restoration. Not of crowns or curtsies. But of smell. Not powdered wigs. Just lavender. You walk the Seine's banks as fog clings low to the water, and Paris exhales through its chimneys. A city recovering, not triumphant, not broken, just in that liminal space between chapters. The guillotine has quieted. The banners are tattered. And somewhere beyond the fog, someone is boiling rosemary on a stove. You can smell it. The scent curls up from a hidden courtyard, mixing with wet stone and wood smoke. It's sharp, medicinal, cleansing. But underneath? A sweetness. A promise. You follow it. It leads you to a small, candlelit apothecary with no sign, no open hours, just a cracked window and a bell that barely rings. Inside, an older woman stirs a pan over a brazier, her fingers stained with herbs and beeswax. Curious? She asks without turning. You nod. She smiles. I'm making balm. For hands that have done too much. You lean closer. Rosemary, sage, chamomile. A pinch of something resinous. Not perfume, not exactly. Not meant for display or seduction. Just relief. You sell it? You ask. She snorts. No. I give it away. People trade bread or stories. You glance around. The shelves are mismatched. A stack of glass vials sits under a cloth embroidered with a single golden M. You point. She notices. Leftover nonsense, she says. Old labels. Once meant for the queen. Your breath catches. From her? She shrugs. Maybe. Maybe not. Everything had her name on it back then. Historians still argue whether perfumers reused the royal monogram after the fall, hoping to elevate the value, or mock it. Some believe the symbol carried dangerous weight, others say it became a blank canvas for longing. You reach into your coat pocket and pull out one of the bitter rinse vials from before. She sees it and nods. You've been down the secret path, she says. Then you know. She uncorks her balm and lets you sniff. It smells human. Salt. Warmth. A soft herbal lullaby. Not royal. Not revolutionary. Just real. Fringe tidbit. One underground scent circle, calling themselves Les Nez Silencieux, the Silent Noses, formed during the later 1790s to exchange formulas, memories, and occasional stolen soap. They held meetings in old bakeries and abandoned attics. You spend the evening listening to her hum as she pours balm into tiny tins. She works slowly, without urgency. Like time has loosened its grip. People will want beauty again, she says. Dusty. Sealed. You glance at her. She holds it out. You hesitate. Then open it. And the scent. It's like late afternoon in June. A patch of sun on a wooden floor. A hand resting on yours without expectation. It doesn't beg for attention. It just is. And you feel something loosen in your chest that's been tight for years. Keep it, she says. You do. And you carry it with you across the city. Over the next weeks, you begin to notice small changes. The laundress in your street has started sprinkling lavender in her rinse again. A grocer tapes orange peel above his door. A bookseller sells bookmarks soaked in mint. Whispers pass through cafes. I heard someone made rosewater again. I smelled cinnamon on her scarf. Did you catch that whiff of cedar in the bakery? You smile. The return of scent isn't announced. It doesn't march or lecture or beg. It blooms. Quietly. Like moss. Like memory. In a schoolhouse, a child hands her teacher a wax seal smelling faintly of thyme. It's for calm, she says, repeating her mother's words. In a hospital, nurses rub eucalyptus on door frames, not for medicine, but for morale. Even in the printing houses, once filled with ink and politics, someone begins scenting pamphlets with crushed basil. A revolution of a different sort. Fringe tidbit. A secret poetry club in Bordeaux starts including scent pairings with their recitations. Balsam for heartbreak, verbena for longing, pine for hope. It's meant as an inside joke, but quickly becomes a tradition. You keep your Soleil du vial close, but rarely open it. It's not meant for everyday use. It's a relic. A whisper of warmth for when the city grows cold again. And one night, while crossing the river, you see something remarkable. A woman, maybe 20, is walking ahead of you. Her coat is threadbare. Her steps are quick. But her hair is pinned with a sprig of dried jasmine. And you swear. As the wind picks up and the moonlight touches her shoulder. You catch it. a hint. Just a breath. Of something once called Hameau de la Rose. Real or not? Who knows? But you smile anyway. Because if scent has survived the scaffold and the silence, it can survive anything. Even forgetting. Even fear. Even the folly of queens and the fire of crowds. The nose remembers what history forgets. And tonight? The air smells like coming home. You wake before sunrise to a city holding its breath. Not because of war, or famine, or even politics this time, but because something has changed, imperceptibly but irrevocably. It isn't the ringing of bells or the shout of merchants that greets you. It's the wind. And the wind smells. Hopeful. Not saccharine, not powdered or pompous. Just a little warm. A little wild. Like someone baked bread and then opened the window. Like someone dared to press a few crushed petals into their collar before stepping into the day. You walk the early streets and find yourself surrounded by quiet proof. Someone has swept the corner shop's step and scattered thyme along the edge. A butcher hums as he rubs lemon balm on his hands. Even the baker, always first to rise, has added a pinch of anise to his flour, and the scent curls into the street like a ribbon. Paris is remembering its nose. But it's not a return to the Versailles era of fragrant fantasy. No one's layering 3 florals and a musk just to prove they're not hungry. This is something else. Something gentler. More honest. Fringe tidbit. For a brief moment in 1799, a tiny newspaper called L'Année Libre, the Free Nose, published scent-themed horoscopes alongside political commentary. It was banned after 5 editions, but their scent pairings, courage. You pass a group of children selling little bundles of dried herbs and flowers tied with string. Not perfume, they say. Just smell, friends. You buy one. It's rosemary, lemon peel, and 2 violets barely holding their color. You tuck it into your pocket and keep walking. The girl who sold it winks. That one helps you remember the good things. She doesn't specify which good things. She doesn't have to. Because suddenly your thoughts are flooded with memory, not yours, exactly, but memory adjacent. Like echoes you inherited from the air. The slow rhythm of a fan stirring bergamot. A hallway whispering with rosewater and regret. The hush of a woman pressing a vial to her throat and wondering if it would change anything. It didn't. But now, maybe it could. In a small alley, you stop beside a man selling paper goods, letters, tags, ledgers, and used pages salvaged from old royal stores. Among them are little strips of linen marked scent samplers. He smiles. They used to smell like lilies. Now they smell like what we have. You lift one. Clove and ink. Like writing something true. Historians still argue when the scent return officially began. Some say it was after Robespierre fell. Others say it started when soap became easier to find than firewood. But most agree it wasn't a date, it was a feeling. A collective sigh. A city daring to want beauty again, even if only in half whispers. You find your way to a riverside shop run by a woman named Estelle. She doesn't call herself a perfumer. She says she makes companion oils. For feelings, she tells you. Not status. She lets you try a few. One smells like eucalyptus and orange zest, like clarity on a hard morning. Another like wet bark and mint, like walking through the woods after crying. A third? Lavender, myrrh, a breath of clean hay. That one's for forgiving yourself, she says. You linger. She sees you. There was a time, she says softly, when scent only meant seduction or station. Now it can mean healing. You nod. Because you've felt it, haven't you? The shift. Not a revolution of guillotines. A revolution of grace. Fringe tidbit. In southern France, a circle of former perfumers developed emotional blends based on human moods. They called them nuances, and each had no name, only a color-coded label and a feeling. The practice faded, but copies of the chart still exist in private collections. As night falls, the air thickens, not with fear, but with the grounded warmth of a city settling into its skin again. People walk slower now. They stop to smell, not because it's rare, but because it's welcome. You pass a courtyard where a group of seamstresses hang damp cloths laced with mint and vinegar. A man recites lines from a play while chewing cardamom. A child wears dried lavender in her boot to keep away bad dreams. Everywhere, a new language. A scented one. No longer about opulence. About being. You pause on a bridge over the Seine. The wind picks up, and for just a moment, you catch a scent that stops you cold. It's soft. Familiar. Not modern. You know it. You turn slowly, searching the breeze. And there, a woman walking alone, her scarf dancing behind her. You catch up gently. What is that scent? You ask. She looks surprised. Something my grandmother kept. She said it was called Soleil Dew. You blink. You know that name. You've smelled it. You have it. You both laugh softly. She lets you breathe it in again, and it hits you the same way it did in that candlelit apothecary. Warmth, memory, peace. I wear it when I want to Now scent doesn't hide. It reveals. You wake in a city that hums, not with noise, but with something subtler. Something softer. It hums like linen drying in the breeze. Like coffee brewing 2 streets away. Like cinnamon bark steeped in a quiet kitchen. Paris has entered its scentful second act. Not a performance this time. A return. But not to gilded mirrors and powdered wigs. To gardens. To kitchens. To comfort. You follow the sound of a low whistle into a courtyard where a young man tends to a crate of potted herbs. He hums as he waters thyme, mints, and chamomile. His dog, smelling faintly of warm bread and wet stone, watches you curiously. People used to say scent was a luxury, the man tells you. Now I think it's a kindness. You nod. You smell it in the details now, in the way a coat holds cedar from the closet, or how bakeries have started brushing orange oil into the air as if it were a benediction. Even the library smells different, old parchment, yes, but now touched with dried lilac tucked between the pages. Someone's doing that on purpose. You sit beside a window cracked open just wide enough to let in the street. A breeze carries hints of beeswax, dust, and maybe cardamom? You can't help it, you smile. Historians still argue whether the French people ever truly forgave perfume. Some say it was simply forgotten, then rediscovered. Others argue it never went away, just shifted. Became less crown, more cradle. Because now, perfume isn't a mask. It's a memory. It's personal. You walk through a new perfumery opened discreetly behind a bakery. No signs. No gold. Just jars. Each labeled in pencil. For the day you say goodbye. For the morning after too much thinking. For when your heart is still sore but beating. No brand. No pretense. Just honesty in a bottle. The woman behind the counter smiles when she sees you. You don't look like you need perfume, she says, but maybe you'd like to smell one. You pick up a small glass dropper marked only with a small sun. The scent, sandalwood, almond milk, and something like sunrise through lace. What's this one? You ask. She shrugs. We haven't named it. No one agrees what it reminds them of. You inhale again. It reminds you of everything and nothing all at once. That feeling you get on a quiet walk when the world stops asking anything of you. You buy it. Not because you need it, but because it knows you. Fringe Tidbit. A small rural town outside Lyon holds a festival each year where participants create new scent blends based on poetry lines drawn from a basket. The blends are judged not by professionals, but by local schoolchildren. Back outside, the streets feel slower. People linger near flowering bushes again. Someone scatters crushed lavender across their doorstep for luck. A barber dabs cologne on a customer's wrists and says, just a touch for joy. Not status. Not seduction. Joy. Even in the art world, you see change. A painter releases a series of works meant to be paired with specific scents. One canvas, mostly yellow swirls and faint fingerprints, is accompanied by a vial of something called pollen and promise. You dab it onto your sleeve and the painting makes sense in a new way. Because scent is more than smell now. It's a companion. A translator. a ghost and a guide. You head toward the palace ruins, not Versailles proper, but a townhouse once owned by one of Marie Antoinette's close allies. The structure is mostly reclaimed by ivy and quiet. A few faded frescoes remain. But inside, tucked in a glass case, is an old bottle. Dusty. Empty, just something soft. Something kind. Something that whispered to a woman more than it impressed a court. You close your eyes. You smell it again. Whether it's real or not doesn't matter. Because now, in this city once split by barricades and burned lace, people are finding their way back to their own skin. And scent? Scent is no longer a performance. It's permission. To feel. To heal. To remember. You walk one final time through a city no longer hiding from itself. The sun is soft against the stone facades, and Paris smells like possibility. The air is no longer sterile with fear or thick with theater. It's warm, grounded, imperfect. Someone just baked bread nearby. A cat padded through a rosemary bush. A neighbor is boiling sugar for jam. All of it mingles into something distinctly unroyal and yet undeniably rich. Not extravagant, real. You pass a florist sweeping petals off her stoop. She pauses, sees you, and tosses a handful of dried blossoms into the wind. Better than incense, she smiles. They catch on your sleeve. Marigold and rose. Later, in a corner cafe, a boy with ink-stained hands sets a jar beside his tea. You ask him what it is. Not perfume, he says. Just something I made for thinking. You uncork it, juniper and lemon rind, honey and firewood. Smells like a fresh page, you tell him. He grins. Exactly. It's moments like this that remind you what survived. Not the palaces or powdered fans. Not the names stitched in gold onto flacons. What survived is the intention behind it. The need to feel something. To carry a piece of the world on your skin, close enough to stir memory, but light enough to vanish. Fringe tidbit. In the early 1800s, a salon in Montmartre kept a scent wall, where visitors pinned scraps of cloth scented with their mood that day. Over time, it became less a fragrance board and more a public diary of the invisible. You wander into a bookshop, the kind where floorboards creak and windows sweat. In the back, among dusty philosophy texts, sits a forgotten box labeled fragments. Inside are scraps of letters, scent labels, sketches of bottles, notes from a bygone perfumer's life. One card reads, "Not to be sold. Just to be remembered." Another, stained with a long faded oil, reads simply, "For the days when memory feels kinder than truth." You leave the shop lighter somehow. You walk on, across bridges and boulevards that once held parades and protests. Your senses open wider now. The smell of leather drying in a cobbler's shop. Soap. Coal smoke. Baking apples. And in the smallest alleyway, a girl draws chalk patterns onto the wall beside a bouquet stuck into a crack in the stone. "What's that for?" you ask. "It's a scent garden," she says, grinning. You lean in. Even dried, the little cluster, lavender, thyme, crushed rosehips, sends up a soft wave of feeling. Not nostalgia, exactly. More like gentle recognition. You touch your pocket, where a tiny bottle still rests. Soleil dew. The Queen's world is gone. The scandals, the court, the powdered airs. The angry chants and pamphlets. All faded into libraries and lectures. But the scent? The idea of scent? That has taken root again. Not in palaces. In people. Historians still argue whether Marie Antoinette's perfumes were truly her own creation or just the handiwork of clever perfumers looking to please a finicky queen. But most now agree, whatever she wore, whatever she loved, whatever she left behind in scent, it touched something beyond power. It touched something human. And maybe, after everything, that was the real a street vendor packing up brushes cinnamon from his apron. A woman adjusts her scarf and a faint warmth of neroli drifts by. A small boy with jam on his cheeks smells like clove and patience. These are not Versailles perfumes. They are not names in catalogs or price tags on silken shelves. These are people scents. Lived-in scents. Truthful scents. You close your eyes. And somewhere, On your own skin, in your own memory, you smell it too. A little of the queen. A little of the child selling herbs. A little of the rosemary balm rubbed into tired hands. You are scented too now. And you carry it gently. Because now you know. Perfume isn't what makes you royal. But it might be what makes you real. And now, let it all soften. Let the palace fade to quiet marble. Let the protests turn to whispers echoing far in the distance. Let the perfume settle like dust on a windowsill, unseen, but always there. You've wandered through a world of petals and politics, of scandal and stillness, of hands mixing oils not for status, but for comfort. You've smelled longing, laughter, rebellion, and release. Now close your eyes. Inhale gently. The world shrinks to a single breath. You're no longer in a market, or a palace, or a storm. You're somewhere warm. Still. Safe. Perhaps near a candle. Perhaps wrapped in linen that holds the faintest note of something kind. And as your mind slows, so too does the city. Its streets quiet. Its lights blink out, one by one. And in the stillness, the scent lingers. Just enough to remind you that history doesn't disappear. It just fades, gently, into skin and memory. You are not carrying the weight of crowns or riots. Only comfort. Only calm. Only the soft, slow scent of sleep wrapping itself around you like warm milk and morning sun. You are home. You are enough. You are held. Sleep well, dream softly, and wake to a world that still remembers how to smell the good things.